Imagine looking around and realizing most people are running in circles, while a tiny few, the top 1%, are quietly moving forward decade after decade. What did they see that you did? What did they understand while everyone else was distracted by noise, comfort, or approval? It's not flashy. It's not about showing off. It's about mastering subtle choices, how they spend time, where they put energy, and what they refuse to compromise on. Most people wait for clarity. The top 1% create it. And the truth is, you can start today no matter where you are. This audiobook will show you how to think, act, and decide like someone who knows the rules early, before life forces you to learn them the hard way. If this resonates, like the video, subscribe and share it with someone who's ready to level up their life quietly but powerfully. Chapter 1. The moment you stop waiting, most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they keep waiting for a feeling that never arrives. They're waiting to be ready, waiting to be confident, waiting to be certain, waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect timing, the perfect plan, the perfect sign. The top 1% figured out something early that changes everything. Readiness is not a prerequisite. Action is the prerequisite. Confidence isn't the door you walk through. Confidence is what shows up after you walk. Picture a kid in a small town in Ohio. Not special, not connected, not wealthy, just observant. He's the kind of kid who notices patterns. His father works shifts. His mother keeps the house running. He watches adults talk about dreams the way they talk about the weather, something that happens outside their control. Maybe one day, they say, if things line up, if we get lucky, if I had the time. At 14, he starts mowing lawn, not because he loves lawns, because he understands something without being able to name it yet. Money is leverage. He knocks on doors with a push mower and a cheap flyer. Some people say no, some people say yes. He sweats through summer, pockets a few hundred, then a few thousand. He buys a second mower. He hires his friend. He learns the first lesson of the top 1%. Your life changes when you stop asking what you deserve and start asking what you can build. By 18, he's not rich, but he's dangerous in a way most people never become, because he has evidence. Evidence that effort turns into outcomes. Evidence that rejection doesn't kill you. Evidence that there is no mystical force deciding your fate. There are only inputs and outputs, decisions and consequences. Meanwhile, someone else's age is still waiting, waiting to graduate, waiting to move out, waiting to feel sure, waiting for the perfect job listing that matches their passions and pays well and never stresses them out, waiting for motivation like it's a delivery that's late. The top 1% don't wait for motivation. They manufacture it. They create momentum, and momentum creates emotion. They wake up and do the work, and the work wakes up something inside them. Here's what most people misunderstand about the moment you stop waiting. It's not a single heroic leap. It's a series of small decisions made with discipline. It's choosing the hard phone call over scrolling. It's sending the email even if you feel unqualified. It's starting the workout even if you're tired. It's saving $50 even if it feels pointless. It's saying no to the extra drink because tomorrow matters. It's putting your name on something you created, even if it's imperfect, and letting the world react. A woman in Phoenix had a stable job in healthcare administration. She was good at it, reliable, the kind of person companies love because she solves problems without being asked. But every day she drove home with the same thought: I'm not using my potential. And then she'd do what millions of people do. She'd push that thought down. She'd tell herself she should be grateful. She'd promised she'd do something soon. One weekend, she visited her cousin who ran a small catering business. They were exhausted but alive, moving fast, taking orders, fixing mistakes in real time. The cousin said something simple: "It's messy, but it's mine." That sentence hit her like a punch. Not because it was poetic, because it was true. That night, she didn't make a 5-year plan. She didn't quit her job. She didn't announce a new identity on social media. She did one thing. She opened a blank document and wrote down a list of skills she already had: scheduling, coordination, vendor relationships, billing, customer service, process improvement. Then she wrote a list of problems those skills could solve for small businesses. She realized she could become an operations consultant for local companies that were drowning in chaos. The next morning, she sent 3 messages to people she knew who owned businesses. Not pitches, questions. "What's the most frustrating part of how your business runs day to day?" 2 of them replied. They talked. She listened. She offered to spend one weekend mapping their processes and proposing fixes. For a small fee. She charged enough to take it seriously, not enough to scare them away. That weekend, she worked like someone with a future, because she stopped waiting for clarity and started collecting it. Clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from contact with reality. This is what the top 1% figured out early. You don't find yourself. You build yourself. You don't discover your purpose like it's hidden under a rock. You choose a direction and you start walking, and purpose forms behind you like a path in fresh snow. People talk about taking a leap. But the top 1% aren't obsessed with leaps. They're obsessed with reps. They want enough attempts that luck has no choice but to notice them. They understand that the average person tries once and calls the result fate. The top 1% tries 100 times and calls the result data. They also understand the hidden tax of waiting. Waiting costs you compounding. It costs you skill accumulation. It costs you relationships built over time. It costs you confidence earned through competence. Every month you delay starting is a month the future version of you could have been training, learning, building, investing, improving. And if you think that sounds dramatic, good. Because it should. Time is not neutral. It's either for you or against you depending on what you do with it. There's a myth in American culture that the top performers are just naturally gifted, that they have some secret trait you don't. It's comforting to believe because it excuses inaction. But the reality is simpler and more demanding. Most top performers are just people who started earlier and stayed in the game longer. They started earlier because they weren't waiting for permission. They didn't need someone to validate their plan. They didn't need someone to tell them they were special. They decided their life was their responsibility, and then they acted like it. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. The top 1% also figured out that anxiety often isn't a warning. It's a signal that you're on the edge of growth. Your brain hates uncertainty. It prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility. So when you start to change, it throws up fear like smoke. Most people see the smoke and run. The top 1% sees the smoke and checks the engine. They ask, is this fear protecting me from real danger, or is it protecting my ego from discomfort? Because that's the truth. Most fear is ego fear. Fear of looking stupid. Fear of being judged. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of being the person who tried. but the top 1% is willing to be the person who tried. They would rather be temporarily embarrassed than permanently trapped. Think of a young man in Atlanta who wanted to get into sales. He had no degree, no experience, and a shaky work history. He applied to a dozen roles and got ignored. He applied to 20 more and got rejected. He started feeling that old story forming. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I should just take any job and stop dreaming. Instead, he did something most people never do. He asked a better question, not, why won't they hire me? But what would make me undeniable? He started treating his life like a training camp. Every day he listened to sales calls online. He wrote down phrases. He practiced objections. He recorded himself and cringed and kept going. He walked into local businesses and offered to sell for them on commission. Most said no. One said yes. It wasn't glamorous. It was uncomfortable. It was real. 3 months later, he had evidence. He had numbers. He had results. He had stories. When he applied again, he didn't say, I'm looking for a chance. He said, here's what I did. Here's what I produced. Here's what I can do for you. That's what stops waiting, evidence. You become someone you can believe in. So what are the practical actions here, the real habits that separate talkers from builders? First, shorten the distance between decision and action. Most people decide and then delay. They decide to get in shape and then wait until Monday. They decide to start a business and then research for 6 months. They decide to fix their finances and then open another tab. The top 1% makes a decision and then does a small action within 24 hours. A call, a purchase, a sign up, a draft, a walk, something that makes the decision real. Second, reduce your need for certainty. Certainty is a luxury you don't earn until after you've built competence. In the beginning, you don't get certainty. You get a direction and a willingness to adjust. So stop demanding guarantees from a world that rewards experiments. Third, protect your mornings. In America, distraction is everywhere. Your phone is a slot machine. Your inbox is a battlefield. Your day gets hijacked before you even pick a goal. The top 1% tends to claim the first part of the day for themselves because that's when the world is quiet and their willpower is strongest. If you can't protect your mornings, protect the first hour you control. Fourth, measure what matters. Waiting thrives in vagueness. I'll start soon is vague. I'll save more is vague. I'll work on my goals is vague. The top 1% picks numbers, hours trained, dollars saved, calls made, pages written, workouts completed. When you measure, you face reality. When you face reality, you improve. And lastly, make peace with discomfort. Discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're leaving the life you've already outgrown. The moment you stop waiting is the moment you stop negotiating with your potential. It's the moment you stop treating your life like a draft and start treating it like a build. So as you sit with this chapter, let your mind go to the places you've been postponing. Where have you been asking for permission you don't need? What decision have you already made in your heart but haven't honored with action? What would your life look like 12 months from now if you stopped waiting and started collecting evidence? And what is the smallest action you can take today that proves to you, not the world, that you're serious? Chapter 2. The compounding edge. In the last chapter, you heard the truth most people avoid. Waiting is expensive, and action is what creates confidence. You saw how evidence turns doubt into momentum, and how the people who rise aren't the ones with perfect plans, but the ones who start and stay in the game. Now it's time to talk about what separates a burst of motivation from a life that keeps climbing long after the mood fades. The top 1% figured out early that intensity is overrated and consistency is undefeated. They don't rely on giant breakthroughs to change their lives. They rely on compounding, the quiet force that makes small, disciplined choices expand until they become obvious to everyone else. Compounding is easy to respect in money, but most people ignore it everywhere else. You understand it when you look at a retirement account. You put in a little, it grows, and decades later it's real. But compounding doesn't just happen in the stock market. It happens in your skills, your health, your reputation, your relationships, your self-trust. Every day is a deposit or a withdrawal. The average person treats life like a series of dramatic moments. They want the big transformation, the new job that fixes everything, the sudden inspiration that flips the switch. The top 1% treats life like a system. They build routines that make progress inevitable even when they're tired, busy, annoyed, or bored. They don't ask, "How do I feel today?" They ask, "What does the system require?" There's a guy in Milwaukee who didn't look like a future executive. His first job out of community college was entry-level operations at a manufacturing company. He wasn't the smartest person in the room. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't have a prestigious background, but he had something rare. He took the long game personally. He noticed a pattern. Most people showed up and reacted. They waited for problems to land on their desk. They complained about management and talked about what the company should do. He did the opposite. He built a small personal system. Every morning before the noise started, he reviewed three things: what bottlenecks were likely today, who needed clarity from him, and what one improvement he could make that would reduce future friction. At first it seemed pointless. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody applauded him for being prepared. But within months, people started noticing that when a line went down or a shipment got delayed, he was already moving. Not because he was lucky, because he had a routine. He kept a running document of recurring issues, tracked what caused them, and wrote simple fixes. He learned the language of the business. He asked supervisors what metrics actually mattered. He spent 15 minutes a day studying process improvement like other people spent 15 minutes reading headlines. 2 years later, he wasn't just useful, he was essential. He didn't get promoted because someone felt generous. He got promoted because his results were compounding while other people stayed flat. That's the compounding edge. It looks small in the moment. It looks boring. It looks like nothing, until it turns into something that can't be ignored. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because their default settings are designed for stagnation. Their environment pulls them toward distraction. Their calendar belongs to everyone else. Their money flows out by accident and they hope they'll save later. Their eating is reactive. Their learning is random. Their sleep is negotiable. Their body is an afterthought. Then they wonder why they feel stuck. The top 1% took their defaults seriously. They understood that your life is mostly what happens automatically. If you want a different life, you don't just need different goals. You need different defaults. A woman in Dallas figured this out when she hit a wall. She was a talented designer with big ambition, but she kept losing momentum. She would go hard for 2 weeks, then disappear for a month. She would tell herself she needed more discipline, then beat herself up when she didn't feel like working. That cycle drained her. One day she realized the truth she didn't want to admit. She wasn't failing from lack of desire. She was failing from lack of structure. Her day had no containers. Social media was always within reach. Notifications were always on. Clients could get her attention at any hour. Her workspace was cluttered. Her projects were scattered. Every time she sat down to work, she had to fight her own life. So she stopped trying to win the fight with willpower. She redesigned the battlefield. She created a simple system. She turned off notifications and removed the apps that hijacked her attention during work hours. She set a start time and an end time for deep work, like an appointment she couldn't miss. She prepared her next day's first task the night before so she wouldn't waste morning energy deciding where to begin. She created a rule: no email until after she produced something. She also created a visible scoreboard on a whiteboard. Days she shipped a deliverable, days she practiced a skill, days she marketed her work. No drama, just tracking. The result wasn't instant magic. But her progress stopped being random. And when progress stops being random, confidence becomes stable. That's what the top 1% is after, not a motivational high. A reliable engine. Here's the deeper idea: compounding requires boredom tolerance. The top 1% learn to endure the part where results haven't shown up yet. Most people quit in the invisible phase. They go to the gym for 2 weeks and stop because the mirror didn't reward them. They post content for a month and stop because it didn't blow up. They study for a certification and stop because it feels slow. They start saving and stop because the number looks small. They never reach compounding because they never stay long enough. But the invisible phase is where the winners are made. It's where habits get welded into identity. It's where you prove to yourself that you're not the kind of person who needs applause to continue. Compounding also demands one more thing: subtraction. You cannot compound if you are constantly leaking energy. The top 1% learn to eliminate what drains them, even when it's socially normal. Look at the typical American schedule. Late nights, early mornings, caffeine to survive, screens until sleep, constant messages, constant noise. People try to build a better life on top of exhaustion and distraction, like building a house on sand. Then they blame themselves when it collapses. The top 1% gets ruthless about recovery and focus because they see them as performance assets. They protect sleep not because it's cozy, but because they understand it's a multiplier. They protect their attention like it's money because it is. They don't give everyone access to their time because access is influence. A former high school football player in Alabama learned this after he stopped playing. In school, practice and games forced a structure on him. After graduation, structure disappeared. He gained weight, started bouncing between jobs, and felt like his drive had evaporated. It wasn't drive that vanished. It was the system that used to carry him, so he rebuilt one. He chose a simple standard: he would train 4 days a week no matter what, not because he felt like it, because he wanted to become someone who keeps promises to himself. He set a bedtime. He prepped meals twice a week. He limited his evenings so he could have early mornings. Then he did something even more powerful. He attached skill building to his routine. After every workout, he spent 30 minutes learning a trade online, then applying it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. A year later, his body changed. His confidence changed. His career changed. People asked him what happened like it was a mystery. It wasn't a mystery. It was compounding. Now let's make this practical in a way you can actually live, not just admire. Start with one system in one domain, not 10. 1. Pick the domain that would create the biggest ripple effect in your life. For many people, it's energy. If you fix energy, everything gets easier. Sleep becomes a base. Movement becomes a base. Nutrition becomes a base. If you can't overhaul everything, you don't need to. Just build a default you can keep. Make it so small it feels almost stupid, but so consistent it becomes automatic. That might be a 10-minute walk every day after lunch. That might be a hard shutdown time for screens at night. That might be preparing tomorrow's first task on a sticky note. That might be saving a specific amount the moment your paycheck hits, automated before you can spend it. That might be reading 10 pages a day, not as a hobby, but as training. Then track it like a professional tracks a metric, not with emotion, with honesty. The point of tracking isn't to punish yourself. It's to remove fantasy. Fantasy is where goals go to die. Reality is where systems get built. Also, design friction. Make the wrong thing harder and the right thing easier. Put the gym clothes where you can't ignore them. Keep junk out of the house if you can't control it. Keep your phone out of reach during work. Set your calendar the day before. Decide your meals before hunger decides for you. Reduce decision fatigue. The top 1% isn't making 10,000 heroic decisions a day. They're making a few smart decisions that make the rest automatic. And remember this, compounding rewards patience, but it punishes inconsistency. If you do the system for a week, then disappear for 3, you reset the snowball. If you do the system most days, even at a low level, the snowball keeps rolling. The top 1% doesn't demand perfection. They demand continuity. So as you move through your next day, pay attention to your defaults. What does your life automatically produce right now? What are you repeatedly doing that is quietly shaping your future without your permission? What small system, done daily, would change your identity over the next year? What would you have if you treated your attention like an investment, your sleep like a weapon, your health like a foundation, and your skills like a savings account that grows every time you show up? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 3. Ownership is your unfair advantage. You've already seen how the top performers don't wait for a feeling to save them, and how they win with consistent systems that compound over time. You've heard what happens when you stop negotiating with your potential and start building evidence, day after day. Now it's time to talk about the decision underneath all of it, the one that turns effort into power instead of exhaustion. The top 1% figured out early that ownership isn't a personality trait, it's a practice. It's a way of thinking that changes the direction of your life because it changes what you believe you control. Most people live like passengers. They're inside the car, but they're not holding the wheel. They blame traffic, whether other drivers, the road, the economy, their boss, their childhood, their luck. Some of those things are real. None of them are steering. Ownership means you accept something that is both heavy and freeing. The outcomes of your life respond best to what you do, not what you wish was different. You stop trying to be right about why it's hard, and you start trying to be effective about what to do next. There's a guy in New Jersey who worked at a warehouse for years. Solid worker, never called out, always did what he was told, but his life stayed the same. Same pay, same stress, same frustration. Every lunch break was a complaint session. Management didn't care. The system was rigged. The company was cheap. The schedules were unfair, and maybe all of that was true, but he was stuck. One day a new supervisor came in and brought a different energy. Not loud, not flashy, just direct. When problems showed up, he taught the team to ask one question first. What can we control right now? At first, the warehouse guy hated it. It felt like management propaganda. But then he noticed something that bothered him more than the supervisor ever could. The people who took control got more control. They got the better shifts, the training opportunities, the trust. Not because the world was fair, but because competence attracts responsibility. So he tested it. He stopped showing up as a victim and started showing up as a builder. He learned how the inventory system actually worked. He volunteered to cross-train. He started tracking where mistakes happened and brought solutions instead of complaints. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because he finally understood the trade. You don't get options by waiting for fairness. You get options by becoming valuable. Within a year, he moved into a lead role, then into scheduling, then into operations. The same company, the same building, the same economy, different life. The turning point wasn't a promotion. The turning point was a mindset shift. If you want to be treated like someone who leads, you must behave like someone who leads before you're rewarded for it. Ownership also means you stop outsourcing your standards. Most people let their environment set the bar. If their friends are undisciplined, they become undisciplined. If their workplace is chaotic, they become chaotic. If their family avoids hard conversations, they avoid hard conversations. They live at the level of the room they're in. The top 1% carries their standard with them. They don't wait for the room to improve. They improve the room by how they show up. That doesn't mean being controlling or arrogant. It means being consistent. It means doing what you said you'd do. It means having boundaries. It means telling the truth quickly. It means making the hard decision before it becomes a crisis. A woman in Chicago learned this with money. Not because she was bad with numbers, but because she was tired. Tired people make expensive choices. She worked 2 jobs for years, and every month was a scramble. She told herself the story that sounded reasonable. I don't make enough to get ahead. And for a long time, that story was true in the way that matters most. It shaped her behavior. Then her car broke down and she had to borrow money again. Sitting in the waiting room, she finally felt something stronger than frustration. She felt disgust at the pattern, not at herself, but at the loop. She realized she'd been living in emergency mode so long that she had normalized it. That night she did a brutal audit, not a hopeful budget, an audit. She listed every recurring expense, every debt, every habit purchase, every subscription she forgot about. She saw the truth on paper. Some of her struggle was income, but some of it was leakage. Not because she was irresponsible, but because she was overwhelmed and unstructured. Ownership didn't mean pretending it was easy. Ownership meant deciding that no matter how unfair the starting line was, she was done being surprised by the same problem. She automated a small savings transfer the day after payday. She negotiated her phone plan. She cut subscriptions. She created one rule: no new debt for anything that doesn't increase my stability. She started taking 1 hour a week to plan meals and grocery shop with a list because she realized convenience was eating her future. She also asked for a raise with a simple case: results she delivered, reliability, and market rates. She didn't beg, she presented. Nothing changed overnight, but within months she had breathing room. Within a year she had an emergency fund. That fund didn't just protect her from a broken car. It protected her identity. She stopped seeing herself as someone life happens to. She became someone who handles life. This is what the top 1% figured out early. Ownership is a feedback loop. When you take responsibility, you take action. When you take action, you create results. When you create results, you trust yourself. When you trust yourself, you take bigger responsibility. That loop lifts you. The opposite loop is what traps people. When you blame, you delay. When you delay, you create more problems. When problems stack up, you feel powerless. When you feel powerless, you blame harder. That loop sinks you. Here's the part most people miss. Ownership doesn't mean you did everything wrong. It means you're the one who will fix it. It means you don't waste your life waiting for someone else to become the person you need them to be. There's a powerful moment when you realize you can stop arguing with reality. Your boss might be unfair, but you can still build leverage. Your industry might be tough, but you can still build skills. Your family might not support you, but you can still build a circle. Your past might be messy, but you can still build a future. Ownership is not a mood. It's a set of choices you practice until it becomes your default. So what does that look like in real life, in the kind of language you use and the habits you build? It starts with how you speak to yourself. The top 1% cleans up their language because they understand language becomes identity. They don't say, I have to. They say, I choose to, because choice restores agency. They don't say, they won't let me. They say, how can I make myself harder to ignore? They don't say, I'm bad at this. They say, I'm untrained, because untrained can be fixed. They don't use their circumstances as a personality. It continues with the decisions you avoid. Most people don't need a new planner. They need a hard conversation. They need to tell a friend they can't keep doing late nights. They need to tell their partner the truth about spending. They need to tell themselves the truth about their screen time. They need to stop tolerating chaos they keep calling normal. Ownership also means you stop asking for directions from people who aren't going where you want to go. You can love people and still refuse their guidance. You can respect your family and still outgrow their fears. You can appreciate your friends and still change your habits. And here's a practical standard that the top 1% uses without announcing it. If something matters, they schedule it. If it's not scheduled, it's a wish. Your workouts, your learning, your budgeting, your sleep, your deep work. The calendar is where ownership becomes visible. Another practice is to run weekly reviews like a professional. Once a week, you look at the reality of your life without judgment. What did I do that worked? What did I do that did? Where did I waste time? Where did I avoid discomfort? What is the one change that would make next week easier? You don't need drama, you need data. Ownership also means you stop doing things that make you weaker on purpose. That sounds harsh, but it's true. The top 1% avoid self-betrayal. They don't make promises they won't keep. They don't talk big and act small. They understand that every time you break your word to yourself, you lose self-trust, and self-trust is the foundation of discipline. So they start with small promises, simple ones, consistent ones, promises that build evidence. They protect that evidence like it's their reputation because it is. One more thing, ownership makes you dangerous because it makes you adaptable. When you own your results, you can change your approach without collapsing emotionally. If something fails, you don't have to protect your ego by pretending it wasn't your fault. You just adjust. That ability to adjust quickly is a competitive advantage in the American landscape, where industries shift fast, technology moves fast, and attention is constantly under attack. People who blame get stuck defending their story. People who own get busy building a better one. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now sit with the weight of this chapter, because it's meant to be heavy in the right way. Where have you been acting like a passenger when you could be holding the wheel? What part of your life are you calling just how it is? That is actually a standard you've been tolerating. What hard conversation, boundary, or decision have you delayed because it would force you to grow? If you practiced ownership for the next 30 days, what would you schedule? What would you cut? What would you stop blaming? And what kind of person would you become when your actions finally matched what you say you want? Chapter 4. Leverage turns effort into freedom. So far you've heard how the top performers stop waiting, build systems that compound, and take ownership instead of living like passengers. You've seen how evidence changes identity and how standards become the steering wheel. Now we move into the next layer, the one that separates hard workers from high achievers, the ability to multiply yourself. The top 1% figured out early that raw effort is not the final goal. Effort is fuel, not the destination. If you only trade hours for outcomes, you will always be capped by the number of hours you can give, the energy you have, and the seasons of life you can survive. They still work hard, sometimes brutally hard, but they aim their work at leverage. Leverage is anything that makes 1 unit of effort produce 10 units of result. It can be a skill that scales, a system that runs without you, a reputation that opens doors, a network that accelerates opportunities, a process that reduces wasted time, a product that sells while you sleep, a team that multiplies execution, or technology that lets you do in minutes what used to take days. The top 1% isn't allergic to effort. They're allergic to effort that doesn't build something bigger. A lot of Americans are raised with a simple equation: work hard and you'll be rewarded. And hard work matters. But the world doesn't reward effort equally. The world rewards value, timing, and leverage. If you don't understand that, you'll work hard for years and still feel like you're sprinting on a treadmill. There's a man in Seattle who started as a delivery driver. Strong work ethic, dependable, proud of being the guy who could handle anything. He'd pick up extra shifts because he believed that was the path. More hours meant more money. More money meant progress, but he hit the ceiling fast. The bills grew as his income grew. The stress grew faster. He wasn't building stability. He was building fatigue. One night he delivered to an office building where a small tech team worked late. He overheard them talking about a tool they built to automate customer support replies. They weren't bragging. They were tired too, but something hit him. They were tired while building something that would reduce future tiredness. He was tired while building nothing that would make next month easier. He didn't suddenly become a programmer. He became a strategist. He started asking different questions. What could I learn that keeps paying me back? What could I build once that helps me many times? What could I do that makes me more valuable per hour, not just busier? He chose a lane that matched his strengths: logistics and operations. He enrolled in a night course on supply chain basics at a local program, then paired it with self-study. He learned how routing works, how inventory flows, how costs get crushed or inflated by small decisions. Then he did something that looks ordinary but is rare. He applied what he learned immediately where he already was. He didn't wait for a new job to become a new person. He started mapping inefficiencies in his delivery routes. He suggested a change to the dispatch process. He built a simple template that reduced errors. He became the guy who didn't just deliver packages, he improved the operation. That's leverage. He turned his daily work into a training ground and his training into outcomes. Within 2 years, he moved into an operations coordinator role, then into a logistics management path. Same work ethic, different trajectory. The difference wasn't hustle. The difference was that his hustle started producing assets, skills, processes, and a reputation for making things run better. That word matters, assets. The top 1% thinks in assets because assets compound. A skill is an asset. A strong body is an asset. A calm nervous system is an asset. A reliable relationship is an asset. A good name is an asset. A clean credit profile is an asset. A portfolio of work is an asset. A set of documented procedures is an asset. And the most overlooked asset of all is trust, because trust reduces friction in every area of life. Most people spend their energy like cash. They spend it and it's gone. The top 1% invests energy into assets that keep paying. Now, leverage can be misunderstood, especially in American culture where people either romanticize grinding or fantasize about shortcuts. Leverage isn't a shortcut. It's a strategy. It still requires work. It just requires the right work. A woman in Nashville wanted to break out of an entry-level marketing role. She was talented, but she kept getting stuck in the same loop. Do tasks, get praised, stay in place. Her boss loved her because she made his life easier. But she wasn't building her own future. She recognized a truth that stings. Being helpful isn't enough if you're only helpful inside someone else's system. So she decided to build an asset that belonged to her, a body of proof. She created a portfolio of results, not just a resume of duties. Every campaign she worked on, she documented what the goal was, what she did, what the numbers were, what improved, and why. She started building repeatable templates for ad copy, reporting, and client onboarding. Not because her company asked, but because she wanted something she could carry. Then she used leverage in a different form, communication. She learned how to present her work in terms that decision makers respect. Not effort, outcomes. She scheduled a meeting and presented 3 things: what was working, what was wasting money, and what she could implement to increase performance. She wasn't asking for validation. She was offering a smarter path. She got promoted, yes, but the real win was bigger. She built a portable asset, proof of value. That proof gave her options. Options are freedom. Here, where leverage becomes personal. Your life is full of places where you are overusing brute force because you haven't built the asset yet. If your finances feel tight, brute force is working more hours forever. Leverage is increasing your value per hour and reducing leakage. It's building a skill that pays more. It's negotiating. It's automating savings. It's using structure so you're not making expensive decisions while tired. If your health feels fragile, brute force is extreme workouts you can't sustain. Leverage is a routine you can repeat in an environment that supports it. It's sleep that multiplies recovery. It's nutrition that reduces cravings. It's consistency that makes willpower less necessary. If your career feels stagnant, brute force is doing more tasks. Leverage is becoming the person who solves higher-level problems, communicates clearly, and produces results that are visible. It's building a portfolio, a reputation, and relationships based on reliability. If your time feels stolen, brute force is trying to cram more into the day. Leverage is creating systems, setting boundaries, and making fewer but better commitments. It's removing the things that create chaos. It's saying no so your yes has power. One of the most underrated forms of leverage is your name, your reputation. In every city in America, there are people who are quietly winning not because they are flashy, but because they are known as dependable. When they say they'll do something, it happens. When they promise a deadline, it's met. When they face a problem, they don't disappear. That reputation acts like a magnet. People bring them opportunities because it reduces risk. And you can build that starting today no matter your background. It doesn't cost money. It costs consistency. Another form of leverage is learning to package your knowledge. Most people learn and keep it trapped in their head. The top 1% learns and documents. They take notes. They create checklists. They build playbooks. They write down what worked. They can repeat success and teach it. That makes them scalable. That's why leaders rise. They can create outcomes through other people, through systems, through clear thinking. Think about the difference between someone who knows how to do something and someone who can make it easier for others to do it. The second person becomes a multiplier. Multipliers get rewarded. So let's turn this into practical moves that don't require a new life, just a new approach. First, pick one skill that increases your value in the marketplace and commit to daily training. Not weekly, daily, even 30 minutes. The key is continuity. Choose something that actually pays in America: communication, sales, operations, data literacy, project management, a trade, software tools, leadership, negotiation. You don't need 10 skills. You need one that becomes a pillar. Second, convert your work into assets. Document what you learn. Save examples. Track results. Create templates. Build a portfolio even if nobody asked. Make your progress visible to yourself first. Evidence is leverage because it eliminates doubt and makes your value portable. Third, build relationship leverage the right way, not networking like a performance. Real relationships built through reliability. Be the person who follows up. Be the person who introduces people without needing credit. Be the person who brings solutions. In the long run, people will remember how you made them feel: safe, supported, respected. That's not softness, that's strategy. Fourth, reduce friction with systems. If you keep making the same mistake, build a guardrail. If you keep losing time to the same distraction, add a barrier. If you keep forgetting tasks, externalize memory into a simple tracking system. The top 1% doesn't keep relearning the same lesson. They build a system so the lesson stays learned. Fifth, stop confusing activity with progress. Progress is movement toward a measurable outcome. Activity is motion without direction. Leverage is choosing the smallest action that produces the biggest result, then repeating it until it becomes normal. Leverage also requires humility, because you have to admit where brute force has been your identity. Some people cling to being the hardest worker because it feels noble. But nobility won't pay your bills, protect your health, or buy back your time. The top 1% respects hard work, but they respect results more. They don't need to be admired for suffering. They want to win. So take a quiet moment and picture your life 1 year from now if you aimed your effort at assets instead of only tasks. What could you build that would make next year easier than this year? Where are you using brute force because you haven't invested in the skill, the system, or the reputation that would multiply you? What would change if you treated your name like currency, your learning like training, and your routines like infrastructure? And what's one asset you can start building today that your future self will thank you for? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 5. Your attention builds your reality. Up to this point, you've seen how the top 1% stops waiting, stacks consistent systems, takes ownership, and aims effort at leverage instead of exhaustion. You've watched ordinary people change their trajectory by collecting evidence and raising their standards. Now we go deeper into the invisible battlefield that decides whether all of that actually sticks, what you allow into your mind, and what you train your attention to obey. The top 1% figured out early that attention is the real currency, not money. Money follows attention. Health follows attention. Relationships follow attention. Your career follows attention. Your emotions follow attention. If your attention is scattered, your life will be scattered. If your attention is disciplined, your life becomes directed. Most people treat their mind like a public park. Anyone can walk in. Any headline can set up camp. Any notification can interrupt. Any opinion can move in rent-free. Then they wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, and exhausted. They're living in a mental environment they didn't design. The top 1% designs it. They understand that what you repeatedly consume becomes what you repeatedly think, and what you repeatedly think becomes what you repeatedly do. They are not casual about inputs. They're not paranoid, they're precise. They know the world is loud on purpose. Every app, every platform, every feed is built to capture and keep your attention. In the USA, you're not just competing against other people. You're competing against entire industries that profit from your distraction. A guy in Northern Virginia learned this the hard way after landing what he thought was his dream job. He got hired into a competitive consulting firm right outside D.C. Good money, sharp coworkers, big clients. On paper, he made it, but his mind felt like it was on fire. He started waking up already behind. He checked his phone before his feet hit the floor. Email, news alerts, messages, group chats, client updates. By the time he got to work, he had already burned half his focus and all his calm. He tried to fix it the way most people do. He bought productivity tools. He rearranged his desk. He drank more coffee. None of it worked because the problem wasn't the tools. The problem was that his mind was being fed chaos and he expected to produce clarity. One morning he missed a detail in a client document and it cost his team. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to shake him. On the ride home, he realized something simple and brutal. He had allowed his attention to become a doormat. Everything wiped its feet on it. So he made a decision that felt almost aggressive. He created a mental gate. First, he stopped starting his day with other people's priorities. He built a rule: no phone for the first 45 minutes. Not because phones are evil, but because mornings are when your mind is most programmable. If you start with urgency, you train urgency. If you start with intention, you train intention. Second, he created blocks of deep work where he was unavailable. Not kind of unavailable, actually unavailable. He told his team when he'd respond to messages, and then he honored it. At first he feared backlash. Instead, something surprising happened. People respected it because his work got sharper. When you deliver value consistently, boundaries become easier to hold. Third, he went on a strict information diet. He didn't quit the news forever. He stopped grazing on it all day. He chose one short window to check what mattered and ignored the rest. He realized that staying constantly updated wasn't making him smarter. It was making him reactive. Within weeks, his mind changed. He could think again. He could focus. His work improved, but the bigger win was internal. He felt like he was driving his day instead of being dragged through it. That's the game. The top 1% also learned that emotional control isn't about being calm all the time. It's about being in charge. It's about choosing your response instead of being controlled by the first feeling that shows up. Most people treat emotions like commands. The top 1% treats emotions like signals. A woman in Detroit, a single mother with 2 kids and a job that never stopped demanding more, used to explode when stress piled up. She wasn't a bad person. She was overloaded. Bills, school pickups, childcare gaps, a boss who texted late, and a family member who always had drama. Her nervous system lived on the edge. One day her son asked her a simple question while she was trying to get dinner done, and she snapped hard. The look on his face made time slow down. She apologized, but the apology didn't erase the moment. That night she didn't promise to be better. She built a system because systems are how you keep promises. She started with a practice that sounds small but is powerful. She stopped responding immediately. Not forever, just a pause. When she felt the spike, she took one breath and asked herself, what is the next right action? Not the perfect action, the next right one. She also created an evening reset routine for 10 minutes after the kids went to bed. No phone, just writing down what was stressing her and what she could actually control tomorrow. It didn't remove the stressors, it removed the fog. She also did something that changed everything. She stopped letting the worst people in her life have full access to her attention. She didn't scream about it. She didn't announce it. She just started answering later, less often, with more boundaries. Her peace became non-negotiable because she finally saw the truth. Attention is not just what you look at. It's what you tolerate. Her life didn't become easy, but she became strong in the right way. Calm became a skill, not a personality. And that skill protected her kids, her work, and her self-respect. The top 1% trains this on purpose. They don't rely on being naturally composed. They build routines that regulate them. They move their body because movement clears static. They sleep because sleep multiplies judgment. They limit alcohol because it steals tomorrow. They choose conversations that sharpen them and reduce conversations that poison them. They don't pretend they're immune to influence. They act like influence is real because it is. Your attention is being shaped by 3 main forces, whether you admit it or not. What you consume, who you spend time with, and what you practice. What you consume includes everything. Your feeds, your music, your shows, your podcasts, your news, your group chats, your talk radio, your comment sections. Some of that is fine. But if you consume outrage, you become reactive. If you consume victim stories all day, you start seeing your life through that lens. If you consume fantasy success without effort, you lose respect for the process. The top 1% protects their respect for the process because it's the only thing that produces real results. Who you spend time with matters because moods are contagious. Standards are contagious. Excuses are contagious. If you're around people who constantly joke about being undisciplined, you will slowly stop taking discipline seriously. If you're around people who normalize debt, chaos, and avoidance, you will start treating those things as normal too. The top 1% is friendly, but not available to everyone. They curate their circle because their future depends on it. What you practice matters because repetition is training. Every time you check your phone impulsively, you practice distraction. Every time you avoid a hard task, you practice avoidance. Every time you keep your word to yourself, you practice integrity. Every time you do the uncomfortable thing anyway, you practice courage. Your life is the result of your training, whether you meant to train that way or not. So here are the practical shifts the top 1% makes early without turning life into a fragile routine. They win the first hour, not by doing 20 things, by doing the right thing. They start with something that strengthens them before the world demands from them. That could be movement, planning, skill training, journaling, or quiet focus. The point is that their day begins with ownership. They create silence. Americans are drowning in noise. The top 1% uses silence like a tool. Silence reveals what you've been avoiding. Silence forces you to face your own mind. And when you can face your own mind, you stop being controlled by it. They build a focus ritual. Same place, same time, same startup routine. Not because they're obsessive, because the brain loves cues. A simple routine tells your mind now it's time to work. Then they remove temptations. They don't sit next to the cookie jar and brag about willpower. They move the jar. They set response windows. Constant availability is not professionalism. It's a lack of boundaries. The top 1% communicates clearly, responds reliably, and protects focus fiercely. They understand that the person who can think deeply will outpace the person who is constantly busy. They do a daily reset, a short review at the end of the day. What mattered today? What didn't? What I'll do first tomorrow? This prevents you from waking up to chaos. It keeps your mind from carrying everything into sleep. And they practice emotional leadership. When something goes wrong, they don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What's the next move?" They don't deny feelings. They refuse to be governed by them. This chapter is about power, not loud power, quiet power, the kind that shows up in your choices when no one is watching. If you master your attention, you master the direction of your life. If you let your attention be stolen, you will live inside someone else's agenda. So consider the reality of your own mental environment. What are you consuming every day that makes you weaker, more reactive, more distracted, more anxious? Who has access to your attention that hasn't earned it? What would change if you protected the first hour of your day and stopped feeding your mind urgency like it's breakfast? What would your life look like if you treated calm as a skill, focus as a practice, and attention as your most valuable asset? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 6. Become the person who finishes. You've heard how the top 1% stops waiting and starts moving, how they build systems that compound, how they take ownership instead of staying passengers, how they aim effort at leverage, and how they guard attention like the currency it is. Each chapter has been pushing toward one truth. Success isn't a mystery. It's a pattern you repeat until it becomes your identity. Now the final step is the one that decides whether everything you've learned becomes a life or stays as information. The top 1% figured out early that the real difference is finishing, Not finishing one big thing once, but becoming the kind of person who finishes as a lifestyle. They don't live in constant beginnings. They don't collect inspiration like trophies. They convert intention into completion, and completion into confidence, and confidence into bigger commitments. Most people love the idea of change. They love the moment they decide. They love the first week when everything feels fresh. They love planning, imagining, talking about who they're about to become. Then the middle arrives, the part where it's not exciting anymore, the part where progress is slower than you want, the part where life hits you with bills, bad moods, long days, distractions, and doubts. That's where the crowd stops. That's where the top 1% separates. They expect the middle. They respect the middle. They train for the middle. A man in San Diego wanted to start a small home services business. He had talent with his hands, a good attitude, and a decent network. He did what many people do. He talked about it for years. He told friends he was going to do it soon. He watched videos. He compared logos. He debated names. He waited for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect amount of money saved. Then his rent went up and his hours got cut. The pressure didn't break him. It forced him to stop negotiating. He didn't launch big. He launched real. He chose a simple offer he could deliver with excellence. He created a basic one-page site and a business profile. He asked 5 people for honest feedback and used it immediately. He printed simple cards and left them where homeowners actually go: hardware stores, local coffee shops, community boards. He didn't beg for support. He made it easy to say yes. The first month was messy. He overbooked. He underpriced. He drove across town too often. He made mistakes. The old him would have taken that as a sign that he wasn't cut out for it, a sign that it was too hard, a sign that he should go back to stable. But the top 1% doesn't interpret difficulty as destiny. They interpret it as training. He did weekly reviews. What jobs were profitable? What jobs were time sinks? What neighborhoods converted best? What customers referred? He adjusted his pricing. He tightened his service area. He created a checklist so he didn't forget steps. He documented his process so he could repeat it. He built a referral script that didn't feel salesy, just clear. He started scheduling his mornings for the hardest tasks and his afternoons for follow-ups. 6 months later, he wasn't just working. He was building. A year later, he hired help. The business became leverage because he earned the right to leverage through finishing the boring parts. Finishing means you don't just start a workout plan. You become the person who trains even when you're tired. Finishing means you don't just make a budget. You become the person who looks at the numbers every week and adjusts. Finishing means you don't just set boundaries. You become the person who keeps them when people test you. Finishing means you don't just decide to focus. You become the person who protects attention when temptation shows up. Here's the moment where everything ties together. Waiting ends when you act. Compounding begins when you repeat. Ownership grows when you tell the truth. Leverage appears when you build assets. Attention becomes power when you guard it. But finishing is what locks all of it into identity. Identity is not what you claim. It's what you can count. The top 1% also figured out that discipline is not a mood and not a punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. It's the way you tell your future self, I'm coming for you and I'm not leaving you alone. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself. The top 1% sees it as alignment. Alignment between what you say matters and what you do each day. When those match, you feel strong. When they don't, you feel scattered. So how do you become someone who finishes? You build a personal code, not a motivational quote, a code you live by. Simple, direct, and non-negotiable. One part of that code is the rule of proof. If you want a different life, you must produce proof. Proof through action, proof through consistency, proof through results you can point to. You don't need to convince everyone, you need to convince yourself. Another part is the rule of reduction. Your next level requires you to stop doing some things, not because they're evil, because they're expensive. The top 1% cuts what drains them, even if it's normal. They cut habits that steal energy. They cut relationships that thrive on drama. They cut commitments that don't match their priorities. They don't do it dramatically. They do it decisively. Another part is the rule of recovery. You cannot finish what you start if your body and mind are constantly depleted. Recovery is not laziness. It's maintenance for the machine that builds your life. Sleep, movement, food, quiet, and boundaries are not luxuries for the top 1%. They're infrastructure. And then there's the rule of one thing. The top 1% does not try to rebuild their whole life in 1 week. They choose the next right thing and execute it with consistency until it becomes normal. Then they add another. They play the long game with short-term discipline. In America, there's a cultural pressure to look successful before you are, to appear confident, to appear busy, to appear like you have it all together. The top 1% doesn't waste energy on appearing. They invest energy in becoming. They understand that the quiet months of training are what produce the loud results later. They also understand that your environment can either help you finish or help you quit. So they build environments that support the person they're becoming. They put reminders where they'll see them. They remove distractions that keep sabotaging them. They set up systems that reduce decision fatigue. They schedule what matters. They run weekly reviews. They keep promises small enough to keep but strong enough to matter. And they practice something that most people avoid. They let their actions do the talking. They don't argue with critics. They don't debate their potential. They don't announce every move. They execute. Then they let results introduce them. Now here's the final truth the top 1% learned early, and it's the one that decides whether you rise or repeat the same year forever. Nobody is coming. No one is going to rescue your schedule. No one is going to protect your attention for you. No one is going to force you to sleep, train, learn, save, build, or heal. No one is going to hand you the confidence you're waiting for. The world will take what you give it and ask for more. That's not depressing, that's liberating, because if nobody is coming, then you are free. You are the one who gets to decide what happens next. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. You don't need to feel ready. You need to move. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be committed. You don't need to win tomorrow. You need to build today. So here is what the call to action looks like in the real world in your actual life. Pick one standard you will not break for the next 30 days. 1, not 10. 1, something that strengthens you and proves who you are. It could be a protected first hour. It could be daily movement. It could be tracking spending. It could be 30 minutes of skill training. It could be shutting down screens at a set time. It could be a weekly review. Choose one and make it non-negotiable. Then build one asset that will still be paying you back a year from now. A skill, a portfolio, a process, a reputation, a relationship, something that compounds, something that turns effort into freedom. Then practice ownership with a simple question whenever life hits you. What can I control right now? Not to deny reality, but to steer inside it. And protect your attention like it's your future, because it is. Your attention will either build a life you respect, or it will be consumed by noise you won't even remember. This is the part where you decide what kind of person you will be from here on out. The person who starts and stops, or the person who finishes. The person who knows a lot, or the person who lives it. The person who waits for motivation, or the person who manufactures momentum. The person who complains about the world, or the person who becomes valuable no matter what the world is doing. Now sit with yourself honestly. What pattern have you been repeating that you're ready to end for good? What would your life look like if you became consistent with one standard and kept it until it changed you? Who would you be a year from now if you protected your attention, built assets, and refused to live like a passenger? What would you finally finish if you stopped negotiating and started executing? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this.